I knew something was off the moment I saw the smirk on Nolan's face. He'd just wrapped up his buzzword-laden monologue about streamlining legacy processes on the company-wide Zoom call, 1,001 people watching. And right before moving to the Q&A, he looked straight into the camera like it was a mirror he couldn't wait to fog up with self-congratulation. "We're done clinging to outdated systems," he said. "It's time to evolve." I'd spent 16 years building the foundation he just called outdated. 16 years keeping Virelia Tech from swallowing its own tail every time someone tried to innovate without understanding the architecture. I wasn't some leftover from the logistics era. I was the reason this AI transition didn't implode on impact. I'd written every line of the modular core they now used across 5 departments. But sure, evolve. Before we get any deeper, a quick thing. 97% of people listen to stories like this without subscribing. If you're one of them, it'd mean a hell of a lot to the team if you hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. Keeps these stories coming. Back to Nolan. He hadn't even been with the company a year. Came in with a PowerPoint and a vape pen and suddenly thought he understood how Core Pulse worked better than I did. Core Pulse was the name I gave the modular backend that supported encrypted access logs, user-level authentication, audit trails, credential rotation, the works. Not open source, not vendor-tethered, built by me. And when I transitioned it to company use 2 years ago, I'd written a clause into the licensing contract. Legally reviewed, board approved, initialed by 3 C-levels. The clause said this: upon voluntary departure of the architect, all system dependencies revert to developer-neutral mode unless a custodial agreement has been executed and signed before resignation. Nobody ever asked what that meant. They just nodded, like I was some relic engineer mumbling about version control and RAID architecture. But that clause had teeth. When they bought up 4 smaller firms in 2021, it was Core Pulse that handled the integration. I restructured authentication layers overnight to stop overlapping credentials from causing security breaches. Nobody noticed. That was the point. I wasn't flashy. I was reliable. I was stability. And every time their new DevOps darlings fumbled a migration, I cleaned it up silently from my second-hand Herman Miller chair with a keyboard so worn you could read my work ethic in the faded keys. They didn't promote me, didn't hand out awards. But when things broke at 2 a.m., guess who got the call? Me. Not Nolan. Not the guys they hired from promising startups. Not the kid who once crashed our testing environment because he thought Docker was just an optional thing. So yeah, when Nolan skipped my emails twice and refused to acknowledge my warning about the clause, I didn't take it personally. I took it professionally. 2 weeks before that call, I'd emailed him and the CTO, flagging the custodial renewal. Told them point blank, Core Pulse's license would auto-revert unless the custodial agreement was renewed before March. Silence. I followed up again. Nothing. HR pinged me instead. Not to talk about the clause. No, they just wanted to confirm I was happy in my role and planning to stay through the next fiscal year. I didn't answer. Instead, I went back to the license document. Section 9D. Highlighted it. Added a new timestamp, secured it in my private archive, and logged every change. I didn't need drama, I just needed proof. And as Nolan leaned back in his chair on that call, smug as a toddler with a crayon and drywall, I knew something he didn't. He thought he was talking over a system. He was talking over a fuse. 2 weeks before Nolan would strut onto that quarterly all-hands like a peacock in a WeWork blazer, I sent the first warning. A clean, professional email, no drama, no emotion, just facts. Subject: Core Pulse custodial renewal required. Licensing clause 9D, approaching auto-revert window. The body of the email was just as direct. As previously noted, Core Pulse's license includes an auto-reversion clause should custodial transfer not be signed prior to voluntary resignation of original architect. We are within the 14-day window. Recommend action if continuation is desired. I CC'd the CEO. Attached the clause, embedded the PDF with audit logs, dated, signed, notarized. I even linked to the internal policy repository with cross-references so no one could play dumb later. No response. I followed up 3 days later. Still nothing. Then I sent a third email, flagged high priority. Still silence. They didn't understand what they were sitting on. Or maybe they did and figured I was bluffing. That I was too invested to walk. That I wouldn't dare flip the kill switch on the very thing I'd built from the ground up. They didn't realize I didn't have to flip anything. It was already set. That's the thing about real infrastructure. It doesn't scream when you mishandle it. It just fails, quietly and absolutely, like a locked vault with no hinges. When HR finally did reach out, it wasn't to discuss the license or the clause or even to ask what Core Pulse actually controlled. It was a chirpy little Slack message from someone in People Ops named Caitlin. Hi there, just checking in to confirm you're staying through FY24. Excited for another great year? That smiley face felt like someone patting my head before handing me a shovel and pointing at a grave. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up the original license again. Clause 9D, the line I'd written 2 years earlier after watching too many brilliant engineers pushed out of their own code. Reversion shall occur automatically and non-reversibly upon architect's voluntary resignation, unless custodial transfer has been executed and maintained in writing. It didn't require their permission. It didn't need to be enacted manually. It was built into the architecture itself, an ownership-triggered failsafe. Elegant, legal, absolute. Just like the core schema it governed, I'd written it to be resilient, quiet, self-sufficient. I added a fresh set of logs to my personal repository, timestamped the clause again, captured screenshots of every ignored message, then locked the files behind dual-factor encryption stored on an external device sitting in my kitchen drawer beneath a bag of rubber bands and a broken egg timer. By that point, the reversion countdown had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. The quarterly all-hands was bloated, theatrical, and exactly what Nolan loved. Over 1,100 employees on the call, each little video square blinking like Christmas lights across 4 continents. They'd branded it Vision Forward Q2 Momentum in some cloying teal font, complete with music so peppy it made me want to unplug my router. I let it play, let them run through the obligatory parade, marketing wins, DEI shoutouts, one awkward attempt at a team kudos slide that spelled milestone wrong. Typical Virilia tech, polish over substance, hype over backbone. Then came the live Q&A. Nolan leaned back in his chair like a man preparing to drop wisdom from a TED stage. Let's open the floor. Don't be shy, folks. I clicked raise hand. You could almost feel the pause on the call. My name popping up must have registered like a fire drill. He nodded toward the panel coordinator. Yeah, let's hear from... Oh, Samantha. Thanks, I said evenly. Quick question for leadership. What's the plan for Core Pulse custodianship post-March? It was surgical, clean, non-accusatory. The kind of question that could have been answered with a one-sentence confirmation. We've got the custodial handoff covered, thanks for checking. Instead, Nolan did what arrogant men always do when they don't understand something. He mocked it. He chuckled, loud enough that it cut through the call and echoed in the speakers. Right. Core Pulse, he said, throwing up finger quotes like a sitcom dad pretending to get the joke. Yeah, we're moving beyond that outdated architecture, frankly. He tilted his head as if weighing his punchline. Your system is trash. A few people laughed. Most didn't. Someone on the panel coughed. Another looked down and clicked something off-screen. But Nolan grinned like he'd just nailed a closer. Like this was the part where the wise CEO put the legacy dev in her place. I looked at my camera. Smiled. Understood, I said. Calm, even, final. Then I resign, effective immediately. This recording will serve as time-stamped notice of my voluntary departure. Silence. No music, no laughter, just a sea of muted mics and stunned, blinking avatars. And then I clicked leave meeting. Just like that. No fireworks, no yelling, no last word theatrics. Because I didn't need to slam the door. The moment I logged out, they pulled the pin themselves. It took exactly 91 minutes. The first ping hit their monitoring dashboard while Nolan was still riding the dopamine high of his mic drop moment. Some junior engineer flagged it as anomalous behavior on Slack. Core Pulse dependency reversion active. Level orange, escalation recommended. By the time someone actually read the alert, it had climbed to level red. Credential flows weren't just lagging, they were failing. Logins across finance, dev, operations, HR, all timing out. No two-factor prompts, no password retries, just error messages in grayscale boxes that read like epitaphs. Within minutes, the audit logs were gone. Not deleted, not wiped, just invisible, encrypted and sealed without a key. Legal couldn't pull access histories. Compliance couldn't verify vendor activity. The CTO, who hadn't responded to a single one of my emails, suddenly had zero visibility into who was even in the system. Then the internal authentication proxy collapsed. not with a crash. No alarms, no fatal error screens, just silence. As if the heartbeat monitor of the company had unplugged itself mid-beat. All the biometric entry points across facilities stopped syncing. Admin badges failed. Remote users got locked in infinite re-auth loops. API endpoints returned null values across the board. The panic didn't start with screaming, it started with Slack going eerily quiet. Then came the emails. Dozens, hundreds, all stacking behind one immutable wall. Core Pulse had gone inert, not broken, not sabotaged, just asleep. That was the part they never understood. I hadn't built a system that could be destroyed. I'd built one that obeyed, and when its architect walked away, it obeyed again, by shutting itself down until told otherwise. But here's the catch. No one left had the authority to tell it anything. There was no vendor override, because there was no vendor, just me. And I was done. The engineers tore through the code base, desperate for an access tunnel. Some overlooked back door. They didn't find one. All they found were keys tied to accounts that no longer existed, time-locked fail-safes, conditional triggers based on my resignation timestamp. They called it a cascading event. I called it math. Because if Nolan had ever actually read the clause in my licensing agreement, he'd have understood this wasn't a bomb. It was a battery disconnect. No explosions, no smoke, just cold silence. They called it a priority tiger team, like that was going to fix anything. Legal. Infrastructure, DevSecOps. A few red-eyed product managers roped in to pretend this was just another post-mortem, not a 5-alarm meltdown in progress. They weren't even in the same room, scattered across time zones, muting each other mid-sentence, tripping over acronyms they didn't fully understand. But they all had one job now: find out why the core of Virelia Tech had just gone dark under their feet. It didn't take long. About 30 minutes into the chaos, someone in legal cracked open the digital archive of the Core Pulse license, indexed under S. Carroll Custodial Agreement Framework, last modified 23 months ago. Clause 9D was right there, bolded, highlighted, signed by then CEO Alexei Tom, CFO Margaret Hauser, and CTO Gregor Tan. The document had been reviewed, time-stamped, and submitted into corporate record by Legal Ops. The ink on it, digitally speaking, was dry. It read, "Reversion shall be automatic and non-reversible upon voluntary resignation of the original architect unless custodial agreement is renewed and actively maintained prior to departure." Under that, system dependencies include authentication module, credential proxy, audit trail engine, encryption framework, vendor keyring. They had a list. They had my name. And they had 0 options. There was no lawsuit to file, no firewall to reset, no emergency contractor to bring in from AWS or India or Mars. This wasn't a breach. This wasn't malicious activity. This wasn't some disgruntled admin dumping code on GitHub. This was compliance. And they'd complied with it beautifully. No breach, no foul, just logic. The CTO, Gregor, was already halfway through a breakdown. He stared at the PDF like it had killed his dog. "Why the hell didn't we renew this?" he muttered, even though he was one of the signatures on it. His face went sheet white when he realized what that meant. No one, not even he, had root access anymore. That's when the real panic started. Not loud, not chaotic, just tight, short breathing across an executive Zoom. Everyone realized all at once that the system hadn't been taken from them. They'd given it away 2 years ago. All because they assumed I'd never leave. That I'd just keep showing up, cleaning up, keeping it all humming, forever. They'd thought they could treat me like a background process. But background processes have shutdown commands too, and I'd just run mine. Arthur Dreyfus didn't speak for the first 10 minutes of the recording. He sat there alone in the legal review room, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, the glow from his laptop making his face look even older than it had 3 months ago when Nolan was hired. The recording played like a slow-motion car crash, company anthem intro, Nolan's speech about transformation, a parade of empty metrics and staged applause. Then came the Q&A. Arthur leaned forward, watched my square light up, played it once. Question for leadership: what's the plan for Core Pulse custodianship post-March? Pause. The camera angle cut to Nolan, his mouth curled into that condescending grin Arthur had seen in too many deposition clips over the years. We're moving beyond that outdated architecture. Frankly, your system is trash. Another pause. Arthur watched me smile, calm, professional, unbothered, and then heard the line again. clear as a verdict. Then I resign, effective immediately. This recording will serve as time-stamped notice. The silence that followed wasn't dead air, it was a sentence. He played it again, paused, took off his glasses, then opened the legal archive and pulled the Core Pulse licensing file. He remembered the clause, vaguely, something about reversion on resignation. Back then, it had seemed more like paranoia than policy. Samantha had insisted on it, but everyone assumed she'd be with the company until they buried her under a standing desk. He read it line by line, then read it again. Then a third time, this time checking metadata, digital signatures, modification history, all intact, all validated, no loopholes, no ambiguity. Just 3 lines of airtight language buried in a signed document that now governed the fate of a multi-million-dollar infrastructure stack. He closed the document, opened Outlook, drafted a subject line, reinstatement proposal, immediate response requested, then called in his assistant, voice low and level, like a man delivering a triage order at a field hospital. I want reinstatement terms drafted before midnight. No contingencies, full custodial restoration, retroactive licensing, reputation clause. The assistant blinked. Understood. Rate? Arthur didn't hesitate. At all costs, he said. Then he leaned back, rubbed his temples, and whispered almost to himself, "She warned us." The line kept playing in his head. Not mine. Nolan's. "Your system is trash." It wasn't just a mistake, it was evidence. The email came in at 6:42 a.m. Saturday morning, just as I was pouring coffee into a chipped mug I'd had since grad school. Subject line, reinstatement proposal, urgent. Attached, a 9-page PDF with all the desperation of a man begging through a lawyer's voice. I didn't open it right away. I finished my coffee first, took the trash out, fed the neighbor's cat while they were in Vermont. Then I sat down, clicked the file, and read the apology they'd wrapped in legal lace. They didn't call it an apology, of course. That would imply responsibility. They called it terms of reinstatement. It included full retroactive custodial compensation for the 2 years since the original clause was signed, back licensing fees with interest, a new custodial agreement at 3 times my previous rate. All of it drafted to take effect the moment I signed. Then came the best part. Page 6, Section 4A, Reputation Correction Clause. It wasn't just money, they were going to walk it back. Publicly, issue a statement from leadership acknowledging the foundational contributions of the Core Pulse system and its architect. A fancy way of saying, we were wrong. She built the bones, and we spat on them. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I just forwarded it to my attorney. 3 hours later, his reply went out. No bullet points. No soft landings. Client declines reinstatement. Clause 9D remains active. All support withdrawn. He CC'd legal at Virelia just to make sure Arthur saw it with his own eyes. No need for a follow-up call. No opening for negotiation. I'd already made peace with my decision. There was nothing they could offer that I hadn't already earned, and nothing they could give back that they hadn't already broken. The system I built wasn't designed to flatter egos or accommodate amateurs. It was designed to protect itself when those in charge no longer could. It did. Now, they were finally seeing it for what it was. Not a product, a boundary, and it was no longer theirs to cross. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7 a.m. on a Monday. Never a good sign. No press, no assistants, no LinkedIn live blogging, just 8 board members blinking at each other from conference rooms, kitchens, hotel lobbies, and at least one muted beach background that fooled nobody. The usual performance was gone. This wasn't damage control. This was triage. Arthur Dreyfus ran the meeting like a surgeon delivering a terminal diagnosis. No preamble, no executive summaries, just the slides. Slide 1. Authentication lockout status, 83% impacted. He clicked. Slide 2. Client data risk, 0 loss, 0 access. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew what it meant. They hadn't been hacked. They'd been locked out by their own infrastructure. Slide 3 hit like a dropped scalpel. System. Core Pulse. Proprietary. Owner. Resigned. A few board members shifted in their chairs. One started to speak, stopped, then just shook her head. Arthur let the silence breathe. Then he spoke. Quiet. Even. 4 departments are running on local cached credentials only. Security has been bypassed to allow basic functionality, but we're at risk of breaching multiple compliance standards by week's end. The support channels are gone. The reversion protocol is final. It's not a bug, it's the contract. Someone finally broke. What about reinstatement? Didn't we? Arthur didn't raise his voice. He just turned the screen off. She declined, he said, formally, through counsel. No gasps, just the quiet sound of realization settling in like concrete. He looked directly at Nolan. The CEO didn't speak, didn't look up. Arthur delivered the last line like a verdict. Your CEO called the system trash. Now we can't even log in. And that was it. No votes, no clapping, no one rushed to defend Nolan or soften the blow. The COO scribbled something. The head of finance stared out the window. Someone muted their mic, but not before sighing. It was the kind of silence that didn't end with answers, just consequences. The system hadn't failed them. They'd failed to respect the person who built it. And now they'd pay, not with headlines, but with passwords they could no longer enter. 2 weeks passed. No emails, no phone calls, just the usual silence of people trying to fix something without admitting it's broken beyond them. Then a knock at my door. Certified mail, no return address, no sender, just my name, typed clean and centered like it was waiting for a verdict. Inside, a printout of a single frame from the company-wide Zoom. The exact second I'd said, "Then I resign," effective immediately. Time-stamped in the corner, 3:47:09 p.m., Estentis, March 14th. Folded against it, a small yellow sticky note. If you ever change your mind, we'll triple the offer. AD. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was tempted, because they still didn't get it. It was never about the money. I slid the sticky note into a drawer, next to a USB stick with the last encrypted checksum of Core Pulse, just in case someone ever tried to claim it didn't exist. I didn't reply. Didn't call. Didn't post anything passive-aggressive on LinkedIn. What would have been the point? Virelia Tech went dark later that week. 3 full days offline. No client logins, no vendor syncs. Teams forced to rebuild from scratch using scraps and legacy code pulled out of desperation. They issued a statement calling it an internal systems realignment. People knew better. The ones who'd laughed on that call didn't laugh now. Some of them reached out, not to apologize, but to fish for insight. I ignored them. The real apology had already been mailed, disguised in Arthur's handwriting. And Core Pulse? It didn't crash, didn't explode. It simply slept, self-contained, unreachable. Exactly as designed. I'd built it to respond only to someone who respected its architecture. When that respect died, it folded in on itself like a shell. I understood it, because I'd done the same. They wanted me to come back, to fix what they broke with arrogance and oversight, but I don't return to places that only learned my value after I walked away. Some systems aren't built for recovery. Some are built to remind you what happens when you speak over the architect. And some just sit in silence, remembered only when it's already too late.